I like a storytelling. You never know who you will bounce up in a funeral in Brooklyn, or anywhere for that matter. It is possible to meet the fella who used to wrap you behind your head during primary school days. You can run into the one who used to thief all your marbles, or the guy who took away your girlfriend. You'll run into faces that jolt your memory and resurrect experiences of a distant past. You look into countenances that point to stories involving teaching, banking, hauling fish net, farming, faces that tell of the revolution, sports, old talk, mamagism, and the time a fella got two good planners and a bull pistol in Grenville. So it was therefore not a big surprise for me when I attended a funeral and I saw a face that transported me back to the days I spent in Belmont, St. George, Grenada. Well, I never knew the man's name, but I knew he used to walk faster than the horses that used to roam the Queen's Park area. You remember when horses used to roam the Queen's Park area? In fact, two brothers from Montmorris got the death when they crashed into a horse near Queen's Park once. Time did a number on that man I'm talking about. And the gray hair replaced the big black afro he once sported. Well, back in the 70s, all of us had afro. Some guys used to catch the linen to grow an afro. So the pleasant face was still there, smiling as usual. But he did not have that big afro again. He walked sprightly as ever. Well, back then, if that man was in front of you, say near Regal, well, Regal Cinema once, Regal, Reno, like they couldn't decide how to call it. If he was in front of you near that cinema, and you were both walking in the direction of the man, we'll now call Corrady James Boulevard, all you saw was the man shot waving in the breeze as he sped along. First, he used to walk fast. Well, I met him at a repast, and the man still raced. Well, this time, when I met him, he was in line for all the delicious food. He was racing for the food. He was overjoyed to see me and the other people he met. Now, while at that funeral that day, I sat there and the service began. And I looked around at all the faces that I saw. I spotted a woman who lived in Green Street and another who hailed from Guave. Why, Grenadians love to attend funerals. Some of them will never come and visit you. But when you die, they attend your funeral. Some attend to sympathize with the family or the deceased, or of the deceased, while others present themselves, and not only themselves, at a happy hour, and they walk with their string band. But we have some nice ways of putting things there. When you walk with your string band, you're walking with a whole bunch of people, your friends. So sometimes Grenadians will say, boy, look, I invite you to this party, Well, don't come with your string band. In other words, come alone. You're alone. Don't come with your string band. So yes, people love the repast, or the happy hour, as it's called. A man died, and everybody called it a happy hour. There's a lot of rum to drink, and rice and peas and curry chicken. Nice food that follows the service as a repast. But funerals these days involve big fete. So all of you who are listening to this, if you can't afford a big fete, you better postpone your death if you can't afford that party. And if you are spiritually inclined and detest certain songs, I'm telling you right now, keep away from the repast, because you might hear them play a song, Sparrow song, all sulphur sweet, because they're playing anything in the repast nowadays. So back to the service. While at the church, I look around because a friend who was not from Grenada asked me to convey a message to a certain individual. He said the individual, his nickname was Shortman. And Shortman was supposed to be at the service, the funeral service. But I did not know who Shortman was, so I keep looking around, looking at all them short fellas, to see which one of them was Shortman. And then I asked a very short man if he knew someone by the name of Shortman, a brave, How could I ask the man that? Well, he told me he was called Shortman, but he was not the Shortman I was looking for. Well, later I learned that the Shortman I was trying to find, he never attended the funeral service. I spotted my good friend, tall boy, rest in peace, nice fellow, died. He was seated then, some distance from me. Tall boy, I appreciated so well because he enjoyed reading my books. He loved the books I've written on Grenada. Now, when the priest asked the congregation to move around and give the right hand of fellowship, everybody got up and was shaking hands. And it was the appropriate time for me to go and say hello to tall boy. There was no room on the bench where he was sitting, so I settled myself near an elderly man and a woman who sat close by. The man looked at me and wanted to know who I was and what part of Grenada I came from. Well, to cut a long story short, I had stumbled into the man who owned the very first minibus in Grenada. Everybody knew him as One More. You know, One More is a walking history book. One More could tell you all about everybody's store. He could tell you about Mr. T.E. Noble Smith. Yes, the man is a walking history book. And he took the time to whisper stories of Grenadians like Mama Ed, Prime Minister Eric Gary. He told me he intended to write a story of the One More bus and how he came up with the idea to put that small bus on the street in Grenada when the roads were dominated by the bigger wooden, well-ventilated buses. Have you ever taken a ride in one of them? He mentioned that a number of wooden buses, the owners called him a big fool. The bus owners, they called him a big fool and laughed at him when he drove the minibus. But soon, there were minibuses all over Grenada, and only a few wooden buses remained. So he had the last laugh. Listen to this. Long before the streets of Brooklyn, including Flatbush, became crowded with the dollar van, One More, who got the name of the bus, drove his minivan in Grenada. I was glad to see he was honored at a ceremony, I think it's last February, around the independence celebration in Grenada. He was honored, and we have to respect people like that. Can't forget them. He was a true pioneer, and I'm glad I'm documenting this. He mentioned the many times people saw him in Brooklyn, where he now lives, and shouted, "One more!" It is no secret that people in Grenada attain nicknames by the way they look or the work they do. One woman told me her relative was called Big Pum, and he lived in Grenadian. There's something I must mention about that chance meeting. Now, right above the bench where we sat, and I actually was close to one more because I got a seat there. There was a number of Latin words written. Latin words are often found in the Catholic Church, more so years ago. Actually, when I was a youngster, I used to call myself a young gospel, and I attended the Catholic Cathedral. The entire Mass was said in Latin. Poor Joey, the acolyte, boy, he used to catch his nene to understand what the priest was saying. And I remember the words, Domino Bobus cum et cum spiritu tuo. I remember that. We used to joke that we did not know the priest was cursing us in his tongue. And yes, poor Joey, the acolyte, used to catch his nene to understand the Latin. Now, one more told me to look up and see if I made out anything. Look up and see if I made out anything significant. I looked up and saw the word Pax, P-A-X, and voluntatis, V-O-L-U-N-T-A-T-I-S. But there was another word that caught my attention. It was, and I spelled it, H-O-M-I-N-I-B-U-S, hominibus. So right above the man who was responsible for operating the first minibus in Grenada, one more, as he was called, was a Latin word that had letters, minibus, H-O-M-I-N-I-B-U-S. So what can I say? One more sat in the right spot. Anthony Wendell, the Riggs. Well, I choose to do my little storytelling. I had no time for this argument, politics, people cussing each other, family talking to each other over politics. And I would just tell my stories. Who want to hear, who want to listen. God bless.